I've made plenty of mistakes. It's it's part of the entrepreneurship journey and part of the human growing up in the world. But I would not have found what I'm doing now if I just leaned into one. So you have to create space for both to come through, because what I do right now comes from a space of stopping, feeling, thinking about other people and how I can impact in that way, given the skills and the experience I have.
Welcome to Limitless, Unlocking Your True Potential. I'm your host, Fiona Walsh, here to guide you on a journey of transformation and emotional freedom. Each week, we'll dive into the stories of change makers, cycle breakers, and experts in personal development, emotional wellness, and healing. Together, we'll uncover what holds us back and discover the tools to step boldly into a life of purpose and possibility. If this episode resonates with you, please be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a friend. Let's amplify these stories and create a ripple effect of impact. Your limitless life starts now. Welcome to the Limitless podcast. Today's guest is someone whose work and presence beautifully bridges science, story, and soul. Ashley Blackington is a board-certified occupational therapist with over 15 years of clinical experience and a deep devotion to untold stories of caregiving, motherhood, and identity. She's the founder of Dovetail, a digital platform created to support family caregivers in the moments that matter the most, simplifying care, communication, and connection. She recently launched the Foundation for Seacoast Youth, which is a not-for-profit dedicated to creating inclusive spaces for play, wellness, and community across New England in the US. Ashley is also a mama of 4 kids, and she's a lifelong cycle breaker. Ancestral, societal, cultural, you name it. She's also the creator and host of the And Both podcast that gives voice to often invisible, in-between moments of modern motherhood through raw, thoughtful conversations. And it was through her podcast that we first connected. I was a guest way back in early 2024, and it was my first podcast interview ever. And it was a really big learning opportunity for me. Believe it or not, we talked about cycle breaking, which feels like a full circle moment today. And at the time, Limitless, it didn't even have a name. It was a seed in the back of my mind that was slowly percolating. So Ashley, welcome to Limitless today. I cannot wait to dive into your story and share all your goodness with my community.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here, and I'm so excited that I'm on your podcast.
That's awesome. All right. Could you start with that pivotal moment in your life where you thought, I'm done, this stops here, the turning point moment where everything started to shift?
Yeah, I think, there are a few, but one that really sticks out and that has sort of really impacted my trajectory over the last, I'll say 7 years, but a little bit longer than that was I was working as a per diem therapist in a hospital. I had done all the things, right? I had checked all the boxes. I went to school for the degree, and then I went to grad school for the degree, and then I stayed and did all the things. And then I got the job at the hospital that I wanted to work at, and everything was great. Couple years into it, I got pregnant with my first and decided at that point, you get those flickers, right? Where you're like, lining up childcare, the accessibility, affordability, all of those pieces of childcare that kind of go across the map. Those are that you're starting to see a little bit behind the curtain. And so I went back in after she was born. I went in per diem and sort of thought there would be more of a pullback to that job. There would be more of a community there because it was a small hospital, big network, small hospital. And it just sort of seemed like once you were out of that intense, this is your caseload, these are your people, you stay after, you do all the things. It was sort of like, whatever. And so my point came when I was working per diem. They had different levels that you had to work, and whatever level of per diem you picked, it differentiated your pay. But how they separated those levels were the number of holidays that you had to work. And they were trying to figure this out. And so they kept sort of rolling out new pieces where, it would be, you had to work this number of holidays, or you had to work this number of shifts during the week or whatever. And it was all just a trial and error thing. But I remember in July of 2018, my third child was about, how old was she? Maybe 5 months old. And so it was after the 4th of July, and they came out with this announcement saying that all the per diems had to work the next 2 out of 3 holidays. And when you looked at the calendar, it was Labor Day, but the schedule was already out. And then it was Thanksgiving, and then it was Christmas. So they were effectively telling us, if you want to stay here and you want to be a per diem and you want to get paid the money that you want to get paid, you have to work Thanksgiving and Christmas. And I had 3 kids. It was my third daughter's first Christmas. And I just remember that moment of like, yeah, no, I'm not going to do that. I am definitely all done with this. And I had been working on a side project, doing some private consulting. And it was, I was really having trouble jumping out of the track that I was so comfortable in and that I knew really well. And it was just that moment of like, piece of paper sitting on my desk saying you had to work all these holidays. And I was like, I absolutely quit. And I left that job about 5 weeks later, and did not look back.
And what was it like when you went home after resigning to tell your husband, like, did he know it was coming, or was it a bit of a like, I just quit my job today because the system's broken and I'm not working Christmas and Thanksgiving? Like, hi.
Yeah. The day that I got that letter, I remember I went home and I said, they're telling us that we have to do this. And I was more enamored with the hospital than he was. Like at that, it's always easier when you're on the outside for someone who really has a touch of reality compared to the indoctrination of a place like that, to say, that doesn't make any sense. Like, why are you doing that? But when I came home and said, they're telling me that I have to work Christmas and Thanksgiving in order to get paid, and it was a big discrepancy in hourly between working the holidays and not working the holidays. And I said, I'm all done. I don't want to do this anymore. I want to see if I can grow this consulting practice. And he was kind of like, we've been together for a very long time. We've been married for a very long time. And it's sort of like once like when your spouse walks into the room and they're like, done, not doing it. My husband was like, okay, so let's get out the Excel spreadsheet and let's get out a piece of paper and let's figure out what we're going to do here. But yeah, no, it was definitely, it was well received, better received than I thought it was going to be. But I also didn't think that it would be, it would go over like a lead balloon, and it didn't. So that's great.
Yeah. I think my partner will listen to this episode and laugh, because I'm the same. I'll be like getting nudges and chipping away and feeling like angsty and like trying to test different things. And then I have a moment where I'm like, okay, that's it. Like, line in the sand. And that's when I notice I go from like thinking and proving and all those things to like my intuition is like, let's just go. And it's very clear and everything. It feels like the waters part and I know where to go. Do you get that intuitive hit and it's just like, go for it, Ashley?
Yeah. For me, that when the decision is made, like I will wallow in the decision for a long time. I do love to look at things from 97 different angles and mind map it all as much as I can. But so once the decision's made, it's like, there's no more planning. Nothing is in the ether. It is all steps forward. Like it becomes easier to write the emails and you push publish and you just are like, I don't know what I'm doing, but what I'm doing right now is not working. And so the only way to get away from what I'm doing right now to where I want to go is to move forward, is to like hit send, hit publish, make the phone call, write the email, send out the LinkedIn connection to the person who's got like umpteen thousand followers that you think, oh my gosh, they'll never get a message from me. We just start clear cutting all of the self-imposed, I would say, thought barriers that I have up until then.
That's really fascinating. So yeah, because we're all somewhat trapped by our own limitations and quite often we're not even aware of them. But did you had a noticeable shift in that stuff was just lifting and you were like, powering forward without that. What are you doing? What are they going to say? Imagine if da 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 da. The like, the little voices in our head that take us down.
Yeah, I took a picture of, so because it was in the hospital, you have a security badge and you have a scanned code, and for whatever reason, I don't know why, but I had to leave my ID tag and the scan card that I had, and I took a picture of my ID. It was just sitting on the desk. I took a picture before I put it underneath my boss's door. And I printed the picture out, and it's on the bulletin board in my office. And so, I can sit here and write an email and hem and haw about like, should I send this? Should I edit this? Whatever. But I have a picture there, and I remember so clearly thinking like, I don't ever want to feel like this again. And I don't want to feel like this so badly that I'm willing to be incredibly uncomfortable in not knowing, what for my elbow in some of these pieces, and figuring it out so that I do not go back to that space.
Mm-hmm. And can you describe for us how you felt at that moment when you're in the hospital still?
When I took the picture?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that was,
like, because you take yourself back there and you're like, that's my motivation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of funny because going into that job, I was so young and I was so eager and I was so enthusiastic, and you come from a space of, I mean, I knew what I was doing. I was trained and certified and all of that stuff, but I didn't know systemically what I was getting into in the culture of where I was working. And I remember that day that my shift ended, but it was on a Sunday, and I was there per diem. There was 2 other people in the hospital. So all of the people that I had worked with, for years and years and years were, they weren't there. And so like I came in on this really quiet day. It was me and one other per diem in the office, and kind of went about the day. And I thought, okay, well, I guess I'm done now. Like there was no goodbye. There's no cake. There's no nothing,
fanfare.
right?
Yeah, no fanfare.
No parade.
It is. I mean, it's so funny when you leave a job, and because before, for most of us, and I've talked about this in other episodes, like I have a real thing with loyalty, and it was really hard when I left corporate to go out on my own. And a lot of it wasn't the fear of like entrepreneurship. It was actually the fear of like being disloyal and resigning and letting down the people around me. But then you go through all of that and you cry and you do all the things, and then you like literally just like hand your pass, either leave it on just leave it in a drawer. You don't even need to give it to someone. You just walk out and close the door, and you're like, this is really fucking strange. Like I probably will never walk in these doors again. And I did get some fanfare. I'm not saying I didn't get a send off and a farewell, but it's very like, like a balloon going down, like anti-fucking climax.
Yeah, no. And I feel like that for me was a good thing. Like I had already, like by my last day, I had already moved on. I had told people a couple weeks before, and probably without intending to, but subconsciously intending to, my last day was a Sunday. So it was the quietest day in the hospital. So not having to deal with that from people, and there's also the part too, like there were a lot of people that had the assumption that I was going to stay home, and I was just like hopping out of the workforce completely. And, I was in a field that's predominantly made of women. People were either starting to have babies or maybe had very young kids. And so just this idea of like, well, you just quit on the hospital. And I was like, I don't really want to deal with this. I'm out of here, and I'm going to not do that, but I'm going to do something that actually works for me. And I was transitioning to something that really was inspiring and fueled a lot of the steps in between there and where I am now with work. And so that decision alone, maybe in the moment, it sort of seems like, oh, I just leave my job. But that decision alone set the path for where I am now. And I could not have predicted that at the time.
Yeah. Did you have at that time when you're in your job and then you resign, did you have a sense that your purpose in life was to do something bigger than just be, a board certified OT in a hospital? And did you have a sense or that you were here to do something bigger, to have a bigger impact?
Yeah, I definitely think so.
Yeah.
I, for a long time joked like I am the least employable person because just this idea of corporate, like massive corporate policy around stuff that just doesn't make sense. I would be like, okay, but seriously, we're doing this. This is what happens. And, and then you go into your feedback reviews and you're like, oh my God, I couldn't roll my eyes any harder at it because this stuff doesn't make sense. When you're talking about hospital and corporate culture, you're setting policies so that things run smoothly. But when you're talking about corporate hospital policy, everything is related to a human, and sometimes things don't line up. Sometimes people have extenuating circumstances, and I just always felt like the patient in all of this and their family got totally lost in the mix, right? Like, on paper, they look one way. I mean, this is every patient. On paper, they look one way. You walk into a room to talk to them and you're like, is this the same? Is this the right person? Like this, even, diagnoses, level of function, all of those pieces. And so what I ended up leaving the hospital to do was to do something that the hospital phased out because they were not able to, the ROI on what they were doing was not enough for the hospital at some level to say, okay, we're going to still keep doing this because we need clinicians. We need clinicians in the hospital. We need them seeing this many patients, billing this many hours, yada, yada. And what we were doing, the home assessments that we did when that facility first opened were phased out because it took a long time. But the people that were going through these assessments were people that were on the bubble of either being able to go home or having to go into another facility. And there's a ton of research out there that the longer you're in the hospital, the more likely it is that you're going to stay in the hospital. And depending on what you go into the hospital for, there's a whole bunch of risk factors around that. And so preventing people from going into the hospital, which is not sexy in the US, which is a really reactive healthcare system, and getting people out of the hospital and back home as quickly as possible and as safely as possible and setting up their environment for them. Those are things that don't generate big revenue. And so at that point, when I was leaving, was like, I really want to do that because I feel like the value add for the patient or client and their family is so far beyond whatever number shows up in a spreadsheet. And if I'm going to do something where I'm going to hang my own shingle and take my license on the road, I want to do something that feels like I'm really helping people and meeting them where they're at.
Yeah. Yeah. And helping the little guy, not the big guys.
Yes, exactly. I know.
Yeah.
Once you get out from that hamster wheel, you're like, I don't even want to go to that pet store anymore. No, thank you very much.
I love it. And then, so it set you off on this new trajectory of like running your own business. And I know it's been through like different variations and stuff. Do we want to fast forward to like where you are today? Because it's a pretty exciting time right now for you. So do you want to like introduce a little bit more about the story behind Dovetail and where you're at with that project?
Yeah. I mean, long story short, in that time that I was a clinician and discharging people every couple of days, every week, and their family that was coming to pick them up, to bring them home, to take care of them, they were overwhelmed. And this is in 2010 through, 2018 or 2010 through 2018, before the pandemic, before, all of life before COVID. And so people were overwhelmed. And when someone discharges from the hospital, their caregiver and them would meet with like 6 different people on the team to go over discharge instructions, anything, education, all of that. And so I would be one of 6 people that's handing somebody a whole pile of stuff to say, oh, don't forget this. And what about this? And blah, 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 blah. And you hand this to people and they say, okay, how am I supposed to fit all this in given everything else that I have going on? And it was, I mean, I can't say everyone because I won't speak in absolutes, but like almost everyone had that. Yeah, they had that similar reaction. And in the back of my head, I was like, someone has got to figure this out, right? Like we're making telescopes to take pictures of deep space. Like, why can't we figure out how to simplify this piece? Because it's logistics. And so twists and turns along the way, ended up creating the platform that I wish that I had to refer every family to when I was a clinician. I started building it in 2023. 2023. And we have been in testing and in development. It is in testing right now. This is middle of April, and it should be out onto the market by the end of April. It's very exciting. It's a caregiver logistics management platform. So it's really designed for family caregivers that want to be able to keep everything in one space. They want to be able to work through the things that they need to work through related to care tasks. So shopping, supplies, communication, all of that stuff. And we are everything there. So it's really just to alleviate that, because in this country, in the US where I am, and also in Canada, there are, in 2023 in the US, there were 1.8 million healthcare positions that were vacant. People are getting older. People are living longer. People are living longer with more chronic illness that requires more doctor's appointments, more medication, more help. And 78% of older adults that are aging in this country, they rely on their friends and family only for all of their care needs because it's so expensive, and it's less accessible. So the way that I think addressing this problem would be the most efficient is not to say like, we can't figure out how to clone more caregivers. We can't figure out how to get more caregivers into the seats, because if we did, we would, right? It's not like people are going to start paying them what they should be paid, unfortunately. It's all of that, the economic component of that. So how about if we can help caregivers that are doing the job right now address their needs and help them become more efficient so that they reduce the overwhelm, so that hopefully they're not burning out, and hopefully they are able to take care of themselves and stay healthy, because if they can be healthy, then they're going to be able to take care of somebody else, because it's not like caregiving is not optional. You know, if somebody can't take care of themselves, people will carve out from their own health and well-being in order to meet the needs of somebody else who cannot do it for themselves.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of people, working parents these days, are caregiving for their children, and then when their parents get to a certain age, which could be at any stage, they're then also adding that to their plate, which is really is a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's huge. I mean, that's the sandwich caregiving generation is growing, and it's only going to grow. By 2035, there's going to be more people over the age of 65 where I live than under 18. It's just
wow.
when you look at the numbers, it's so scary. 20 right now, in where I live, there are 7 caregivers per care recipient. By 2050, it's going to be 4. So we're going to have less people, and we're going to have more people that need it.
Yeah,
and it's
people
just
living longer as well.
Yeah, yeah.
And so, I mean, you gave the example of people leaving hospital having a big sort of burden to take on. I'm guessing as well that the platform or the app is useful for people who are not in the hospital system, but like maybe managing a child with additional needs, or a elderly parent or an adult in their life that has got a new illness or a new diagnosis.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's designed for care across the board. So if you're a parent who needs to coordinate a whole bunch of things like any parent does, right? If you've got a group, if you've got a babysitter, if you've got any sort of childcare, if you have specialists, all of those things, if you need to coordinate communication and sort of keep a rolling log of what is going on, you can use the platform for that. But I intentionally made it so that it is, the back end of it is a framework. It's not to say this is only in this lane for this subset of people, because care looks different for everybody. What your care network looks like is not going to be the same for everyone. So to say, 2 parents and 2.2 children and the dog and the picket fence are the people that we serve on this platform is like, that's the farthest from the truth. People rely on their neighbors and they rely on extended family. And how do you get people that live geographically far away from you? How can they help participate in care? And so those are some of the things that we troubleshot with this build.
That's amazing.
Thank you.
I want to switch gears, if that's okay.
Sure.
Because I said at the start how you've been like a lifelong cycle breaker. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about little Ashley and what she was like. And can you remember the first cycle or one of the first cycles that you broke?
Oh, that's a big one. There's the first one is interesting. I don't even know if I could put my finger on what the first one would be. I think,
maybe a prominent one from your childhood.
Oh, there's a story about me that is quite hilarious that I told my kids once, and they bring it up all the time. So when I was younger, I lived in Canada, and when I was in 5th grade, there was we were working on this project. We were talking about something to do with government and getting involved and all of this stuff. And I was out at recess, and there were kids that were playing. This is when Power Rangers was like the biggest thing ever. Yep. And I remember I was out at recess, and all these kids are fighting and they're pretending to be Power Rangers. And I was like, if people just watch people be violent on TV, they're going to be violent. I mean, my 5th grade self did not have that like clarity, but I was like, if this looks like a Power Ranger show, our kid's going to do more of this because, and we had some project that we had to do. And I decided to make a petition to write to CBC Canada and send in this petition saying, like violence on TV promotes violence for younger kids.
Yeah.
This is in 1994. And so I had this whole petition, like typed it out. My dad typed it at his office because we didn't even have, we had a computer, but we didn't have a printer.
Yeah.
And then I went around the school and got kids to sign it. I mean, these are kids like 1st grade, 2nd grade, right? Like they can't write their name or whatever, but they can write their name, but it's not like, adult signatures. It wasn't, the people canvassing on the sidewalk. But I put together this whole petition and I sent it to them with a letter that said like, it's not great. And this is blah, blah, blah. They wrote me back. So they wrote me, they wrote me back, and they were basically like, thanks for your feedback or whatever. And I remember being like, I worked so hard on that. I didn't want this. And my 5th grade teacher at the time told my parents, he was like, she might be prime minister one day because like who is taking on this project?
Which 10-year-old has this kind of like advocacy in their bloodstream?
But I just remember I was so like, this is wrong. And somebody has to say something about this.
Yeah. I love it.
Know. Yeah. My kids, they like to bring up the Power Rangers. And they're like, remember, Mom?
The seeds were planted.
Mm-hmm.
What else were you like as a little girl?
I was quiet for a lot of that. I was quiet. I did not grow up in a way that that kind of advocacy was. Some people in my family were very supportive of that. Like my grandmother was very outspoken. She was like 5'1", this little teeny tiny woman who was married to my grandfather was like a giant of a man. And she was the first woman that I ever in my life encountered who told people exactly what she thought. And I just remember
that's rare for that generation.
Oh yeah. No, she was unbelievable.
So firecracker.
Firecracker. Oh my gosh. when we were little, we used to go and we'd stay with our grandparents. And I remember I went to the grocery store with my grandmother, and she paid for groceries, and the person, was handing her change back and didn't say anything. And my grandmother stood there, like a hand out, stand there, and she had the change in her hand. And the lady is like, "What?" And she was like, "You didn't say thank you. Like, I came in here and I shopped and I am spending money, and you're supposed to say thank you. Like, that's not okay." And I remember being a kid and being like, oh my God, what is happening? Because a lot of what was modeled for me was like, be sweet, be kind, be quiet. And she was like, no, I have a problem with this. And I had so many of those instances with her when I was a kid, where I was like, I want to be exactly like that. I want to be exactly like the person who doesn't just say, oh, okay, and then, gets in their car and drives away and is like, well, that feels kind of crummy. She was amazing.
And so the environment you were brought up in there was not as much like that. Like your household was more like, be a good girl and be quiet and be seen but not heard. Like good grades, be seen, not heard. That sort of conditioning.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
It was definitely, I was raised in this weird way where the idea was that, my dad always said I had two sons. I have a brother, and he would say I have two sons. And at the time, it was supposed to be a compliment. It was like, I've raised you to like be a man.
Oh, far out.
Yeah. So yeah.
Sorry.
There's a lot of copay that goes into that sentence. But they,
when the penny drops in the comment and you're like, right.
Oh, perfect.
Wow.
And and it was, at the time it was probably truly meant to be a compliment, but I was like,
oh yeah, there's positive intent. Yeah, I'm sure you have positive intent. Yeah.
I mean, we'll give it benefit of that. But it was this idea of like, you can be aggressive and you can be assertive when you go out and do all of these things in the world, right? Like you can send the email and send the connection request and all that stuff. But when you're home, you have to be a good girl. And
also, it was like you had to, it was very sort of almost two-faced.
Yeah. And that didn't work. That didn't last it lasted for a long time, but I didn't last very long in that situation. I left home when I was young and again, never looked back.
And so what's your view around feminism? And do you think that were you interested in it when you were younger because of this conditioning, or was it the opposite? You were more like pulled towards masculine?
I think the idea of like growing up in a way where the idea was that masculine is good and feminism is weak.
Yeah.
It just like, it didn't make sense. Right. And it still doesn't make sense to me that people still have this philosophy because, women have children. Like you joke about a man cold, and women have like human beings that come out of their body. It's just the idea that the value that you have and the value that you provide for the world is tied to either what you do selflessly or what you can do that earns all of this money and all of this fanfare. Like none of it ever really made sense to me. And I think that feminism, for my jump in point with feminism, was this idea of like, I think that to me, what feminism is embodying all of those parts about being assertive and all of that, but not having it be couched under this idea of like being very masculine. I also was raised in Canada playing hockey. And but at the time, this is in the early 90s.
Ice hockey for the people in the Southern Hemisphere. Because in the Southern Hemisphere, hockey is field hockey. So because summer is more dominant than winter. So ice hockey, yep.
Yeah. So I grew up in that culture of the hyper masculine Canadian hockey, but there were no women's teams around. And so it was...
You were playing with the boys.
I played with the boys. I had my hair braided and tucked up under my helmet, and it was just don't be you. And then when I was older, and also
ice hockey's like rough.
Yeah,
like it's a tough sport. Like if you've got kids with aggression, it's good to put them in. No, it is good to put them in because they can actually like, they're allowed to bash in and like get that energy out. It's actually good for kids with sensory needs so they can release through the body bashing. Yeah. And you're all padded up and stuff. So, yeah.
And so for me, like in that space, like in the locker room where people are like calling each other names and people are like coming after each other and people are fighting and all of that stuff, like I was already tuned up to be that way because of that was the masculine part that I was exposed to. And then when I got to be a little older, I played hockey on girls teams. And it was a really interesting shift for me because it's the same stuff, right? It's the same, like we are going to go out there and we are going to win. We're going to skate hard, shoot hard, all of that stuff. But you don't have that, like, you suck if you miss a shot or you whatever. Like you don't have that tearing each other apart culture to the same degree. Like it was much more, we're going to sort this out and we're going to figure out how to win this game and all of this stuff. And that, I think that for me was this emerging piece of like, this is what feels right. This is what feels better to work on solving a problem or winning a game, or this is what a team feels like. It's not who can like spit across the room the farthest.
Yeah. You know, what's coming through for me was like the boys' locker room, there was a lot of competition. And in the girls' locker room, it was more like collaboration and co-creation.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. I mean, it was like, it's two different worlds, and you still get that competitiveness, and you still get the camaraderie, and you still get the intensity and the desire to win. But how you go about doing it doesn't involve tearing everybody else apart in the room. And that for me, having that experience of saying, I do want to win. I want to be successful, and I want my company to be successful, and I want my podcast to be successful, and I want my children to like talk about their feelings, and I want them to also excel at the activities that they want to do. How do what sort of, I don't know, inspiration or what sort of people can I point to? And it wasn't an NHL team, for sure. It was the people that can juggle that intensity and competition, but also have that emotional awareness and assertiveness and drive to look at the problem as the problem and not say, if I can't do it, it's me problem. This is the problem and how can I fix this?
Yeah. Wow. That's so cool. I love how just like your ability to have played just on two separate teams enabled you to unpack quite a complex sort of theory. And I agree with you. Like it's in the how is where we see the differences between someone with masculine or feminine energy and how they're choosing to leave or show up in life. And I will preface like with saying that everyone has masculine and feminine energy. It doesn't matter what gender you are or what your pronouns are. We have both, and we have the ability to lean into one or the other. And a lot of the conversations that I have on Limitless is around, people shifting from the proving and the performing, and that's very masculine energy, to the more feminine energy is more like taking a step back and actually creating space and seeing what drops in and seeing if things come to you rather than just like gripping and forcing and controlling all the time. How do you see masculine and feminine energy sort of play out in your everyday life?
Yeah, I mean, I think like to the point that that you were just making is that I wouldn't be doing what I do now because the masculine, if you're talking about maybe sort of bigger concepts, like if I stayed in the masculine space or that I guess thought process, I would have worked those holidays. I would have stayed and head down, and I wouldn't be where I am now. I wouldn't have gone down so many paths. Not all of them are correct. It's not like, oh, I picked the right one. I've made plenty of mistakes. It's part of the entrepreneurship journey and part of the human growing up in the world. But I would not have found what I'm doing now if I just leaned into one. So you have to create space for both to come through, because what I do right now, it comes from a space of stopping, feeling, thinking about other people and how I can impact in that way, given the skills and the experience I have.
Yeah.
Versus just trying to drive my head through a wall.
Yeah. Yeah. Head down and just keep going no matter what.
Yep.
And that's
Mm-hmm.
how we burn out. You just mentioned making mistakes on your entrepreneurial journey. And I'm always curious because everyone has their own take on failure, and it feels like it's very much an evolving process for most people. Can you share a little bit about your journey of like maybe when you left the hospital and what failure looked and felt like then compared to now? Because I know you have ridden the wave and you still are in many ways with launching Dovetail into the market. What have you learned about failure?
I think that what I've learned is that the idea, if you get if you hold on really tight to failure in business as failure of person,
Mm-hmm.
you're gonna wash out in no time at all. And I think that that's a hard thing to learn, because especially when you do something for yourself, you know the problem, and you know kind of what you want the answer to be, and you know what you want the solution to look like, and all of those pieces, but you don't necessarily know how to do that. So, I've made mistakes with marketing. I've made mistakes with product development. I've made mistakes with, launching and all of those things along the way. And some of them are little things where you sort of course correct. And some of them are things where you're like, okay, well, I'm not entirely sure that I should be doing this anymore.
Yeah.
But it's that drive to say, okay, today sucked, or this week sucked. And I can either say, all right, this is the end for me, or I can just carry on, pivot and figure out how to evolve into the next step.
And when you are in a hole, like you've had a week, you've had some rejections and you've been kicked a few times while you're down, because they do tend to pile up, I feel like. Mm-hmm. What are some things that you do? What are some practical things that you do to pick yourself up?
Yeah. I mean, I think that it's easy as an entrepreneur to go down the rabbit hole on your own stuff. And that's when you get into that space of like, okay, I met with 3 VCs, and each of them offered me completely different feedback. So like, what am I supposed to do with that?
Yeah.
I did not line up the way that I wanted to line up on this launch, or this, the social media piece, like that doesn't work. I mean, that if someone's cracked the code on that, please send me a message, because that stuff is unreal. But that's when I don't live in service of the grind to keep grinding. That's when it's like, I'm going to close this laptop and I'm going to go outside, and I'm going to get a little fresh air, and I'm going to get a little perspective, because it's really easy, especially now, like I work in my own house. So it's really easy to say, oh, I'm just going to pop in the office for a second. And then 3 hours later, I've got 82 tabs open on my computer, and I'm trying to like rework some whole thing. Meanwhile, outside of my office door, there are 4 kids who are playing a board game going, Mom, 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 come and play with us. And that's what I actually want to be doing.
Yeah.
That's, and getting some space between what currently is not working in the moment for me with work, or having some space to think about maybe how to approach it differently, and doing those other things in my life that's why I'm here. That's what I want to do. That's why I work in my house. So really saying, okay, I'm not, if I work until 5 o'clock today, or I work until 11 o'clock today, today is not going to be the day where like NASDAQ calls me and says, we need you to ring the bell. Like, it's not going to happen. And I have to accept that sticking my head in a blender and calling this a good day at work is not going to be successful. So I'm going to change gears and get out of my own way for a while.
Yeah. Yeah, I found that a really interesting, like, internal tug of war that I've had. Like, I've only worked for myself for a shorter amount of time than you have, but like, part of my move out of corporate was to create like the working family. I don't like using the word balance, but just like the freedom that it would work better for our family, but I got to do the work that lit me up. But I also was able to be there for my kids when they needed me, because them going to school and then going to after school care and me picking them up at 5:30 was not working, particularly for one of my children. So it wasn't a solution that our family could use. And I was pissed off at that for a long time, that we didn't fit into that box of how working parents could make it work. But then I still found myself recently on spring break where I was just like having this really good time with my kids, but the little back of my head was like, oh my God, you need to do that for the podcast and you haven't posted that and you're falling behind and da-da-da-da. And I was like, you need to sort of take, as you say, take that step back and be like, open up the thing and be like, no. Your kids are not in a camp on the holidays and they're at home and you're doing the thing. Like, it's not easy and it's not perfect, but just constantly reminding yourself of recalibrating of this is where we're at now and this is what it looks and feels like. Is this what we wanted? And if it's not, as you say, take a step back, get some perspective and figure out what's the next move, what's the next iteration of this.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, too, my kids are older and they're not old. They're 12, 10, 7, and 5. So they're not 20, but they're not babies, right? I'm not feeding somebody every 2 hours. I don't have naps that I deal with anymore and all that stuff. And I think that's the other thing too, that really gets lost in the messaging for a lot of people. And especially when you're talking about having your own business or doing your own thing, is that I wanted to launch a podcast for 2 years, but I wasn't able to because I didn't have all of my kids in some form of school, like preschool or regular school. And it's really easy to be like, oh my gosh, this is so frustrating. I can't believe this is the thing I want to do and I can't do it right now. But what's the quality or what's the value add of trying to cram something in because I feel like I should be doing it right now?
Yeah.
I wasn't in a space to do that.
Should be.
Should can go take a hike.
Or if you're ever saying should, just catch it, because it's I
have a keychain that says don't should on yourself.
Oh, really?
Yeah. My kids are like, what does that mean? I'm like, it means everything, guys. It means everything in the world. But I think, and so my kids, I think it's also really good for them, all of them, not just the girls or just the boys. I think it's really good for them to say, this is what I do. And this is, I'm here doing this. And also, if they're not in camp and they're home, our house, sometimes it's mayhem and sometimes everyone can just be in their own home and they can be reading or playing outside or whatever. But I don't feel this strong urge that since I'm home, I need to be setting up a craft station. My house doesn't look like an Instagram post. There's no mommy's going to go to work. And so I've set up 92 activities for you to do. And we're going to hand make our own cereal later. I'm like, you can reach the box. You can pour the cereal. I love you. You are an independent human being. Call me if you need anything. Don't run with scissors. And please don't run with sticks. Just keeping it simple, keeping it realistic. Just trying to model that's what it is. My husband is self-employed too. So we had these jobs that don't look like other people's jobs. And they're like, how come we don't do this? And I'm like, well, that's because I live here.
Yeah. I don't leave.
Yeah. Right? And they're like, what about my friends? They're going away for holidays, for 6 weeks out of the year, not 6 weeks, but Christmas break and spring break and then summer and all this stuff. And I'm like, that's great. But they also get paid vacation and we don't. So we're here working and that's what it looks like. But we can flex those things around so we can have vacation when other people don't.
Yeah.
Just different.
Yeah. Just doing it in a different way. Mm-hmm. I think that's cool to model for your children. They don't quite get it at the moment, because I remember being a kid and you just wanted to be like everybody else and you wanted your family life to look and feel like everybody else. But once you grow up, you realize that that's complete bullshit and you really never know what's going on in someone else's house.
For sure. Yeah. And I mean, especially the way that I grew up, people didn't know what was going on in my house. And people had a lot of assumptions that things were all great. I had the 2 parents and 2 kids and the dog and literally a picket fence. And you're like, little bit of a house of horrors here. So I'm not sure why anyone is like wanting to strive for this situation. Like I want out the front door and you guys want in. Happy to trade. Thank you very much.
Yeah. And I think it's even worse now because what people project on social media is it's not just what, in the past you saw or you conjured up in your mind based on what someone told you at school. Now people are actually putting out like a way of living on social media, which is so far from the truth. Like, you never have rarely do you have your phone up videoing when your kids are all beating each other up, or you've like,
hold on, this is the best content.
Like this morning when I like turned around and poked my very long fingernail into one of my children's eyes accidentally. Like you don't capture those moments.
Like, let's do it again so I can make some content.
Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, yeah.
People don't talk about that stuff. And I think too, like to our generation of parents, the support that you have is the new conversation around salary that our parents had, right? Like when our parents were our age, it was like, you don't talk about how much money you make and you don't talk about all of that. Now you can Google salaries and you can get that information, but people don't talk about the support that they have. So when you see that stuff on Instagram, those people aren't thanking the person that cleans their house. They're not thanking the person who picks up their kids from school. They're not thanking the family members that make it possible for them and their spouse to go on a 6-day vacation to blah, blah, blah. Yeah. I mean, they should. If your parents are coming to watch your kids, you should definitely thank them. But it's this idea of like, we want to show people that we are doing it all, but you don't show anybody the scaffolding that's in place in order for that. And I think that's it makes your life look like a movie set, right? Like everything looks great, but behind there is nothing. It's a desert.
Yeah, that's really interesting because I was speaking to someone who's setting up a coaching business just recently, and I was saying to them like, I got given this advice when I first started up, and it is true, but it's not always spoken about. Like every coach I know, every good coach has a coach, they have a therapist. Because when you're working and they have like maybe like a coach who helps with messaging versus something, the marketing side versus the coaching skill side. Because like if you're working for yourself, you need a team of people supporting you to be your best self. It's not just like me winging it on my own. And because I did try and wing it on my own for a good portion of time, and it's very slow, and you get yourself into lots of knots and stuff. It's not an efficient way to be. So yeah, there's always so much behind what we project onto social media.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's not
low morphing it is A, never a good strategy, and B, it's not what 99% of people are actually doing.
Yeah, and that just I think that during the pandemic, that was the nice part, is that no one could keep the facade up for that long, because when you've got like you're given the weather report and your kid is standing in the room with a diaper on, or whatever, like you can't do that. And I worry that the farther we get away from that, the more likely it is that we're going to swing back to the way it was before. But I mean, I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that we've had enough attention called to these things about people and what's behind the curtain, that it won't go back. But I think there's always an inherent risk, because you want to sell a lifestyle. There's people out there who are talking about, it's the trad wife phenomenon, right? These people out there talking about how they are home and they raise their kids and they blah, blah, blah. But then they want you to buy like their dish towels and their clothes and their everything. So like, you're really a business owner. You're a CEO of a lifestyle, and you're trying to get people on board to that. So
it's your brand.
Call it what it is.
Yeah.
You sell your waffle maker, I don't care, but I don't want to be made to feel like I'm not doing the good job as a mom because I don't have your waffle maker.
Totally.
Yeah.
Okay, I've got one last question, and then we go into some rapid fire questions.
Ooh.
Okay, so transformation happens in very small, intentional, incremental steps. It's rarely these huge quantum leaps, which we hear about. And in these micro moments is when we start to access our deeper selves and unlock long-lasting change. Now, based on your incredible journey through life, what's one small step or action that my community could take or begin this week that you've done that would unlock their limitless potential?
I think one thing that has been a through line in so much of what I've done is the pause.
Yes.
So it's the pause before the decision. And I think that when if there is sort of a stimulus or some sort of irritant or whatever it is, if you only react without a pause, then that leaves space for regret. Because you're like, did I really just shoot from the hip, or did I just say, did I make the right choice? Yeah. But when you have that moment where you could go left or go right, when you take a pause in that and say, okay, let's think about this a little bit, and then make a decision from the pause versus making the decision from the stimulus, that for me is a big thing. And that's really what's led to being able to say, okay, like, I quit my job. I didn't get a letter and quit my job that day. I got a letter and I quit my job 2 weeks later and gave them 4 weeks notice. But it was, I mean, if my boss had walked into my office when they put that letter on my desk, I would have walked right out the front door. But then I wouldn't have had the opportunity to sort of unpack that and say, okay, is this really what I want to do? It would have been just a reactionary response.
Yeah. And the pause and the deliberation and like getting out of your reaction or emotional response when your brain's like in threat or, a threat mode is really a sign of emotional maturity, which I think we're all aiming for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, you need to put space. The more you're able to put space and put space, not to say like, I'm going to count to 10, but to say, all right, I'm going to consider all of these things and then act from there, the better off you're going to be.
Absolutely. I love that. Okay. What's one thing you're deeply grateful for right now?
I am deeply grateful for my kids. They're so fun right now. They're just in this space of life where everything is, there's 4 of them. And so they are all having these different experiences. Like one of my kids in middle school and one of my kids is sort of taking the next step when it comes to like athletics. And, it's just, I'm so grateful that I have the opportunity to really get to know my kids and to go through life with them.
Yes. I love that. What's a common misconception that people have about you?
Ooh, that's a good one. I think that people often feel like I think the assertiveness gets twisted in the mix, and I can see how that happens. But I also am like, well, that's you. It's your judgment. Thank you very much.
Yeah, assertive versus people might say aggressive.
Yeah, and I do think a lot about stuff. Like I think that because once a decision's made, I act fast. That can be thought of as like, oh well, she's just like tearing the roof off of this thing again. But I do think a lot about other people and what other people how they may experience whatever that is.
Yeah. I can tell you're very thoughtful and measured, but once you've made a call, it's like, go. But people might be assuming that there was no thoughtful and measured period, which there always is for you. If you could give your younger self, your little Ashley, a piece of advice, what would that be?
That you have to follow your gut every time. And that every decision that I have ever made, truly every decision that I have ever made, like, leaving my house when I did, I moved to America when I was 15 years old. And it's being able to say like, when you move to another country as a minor, flew from Calgary, and you go through customs in Calgary, and I went into the airport with my dad, and they separated us at customs, and I went into a room that had 2 doors, and one door is into the airport and the other door is out of the airport because they're trying to prevent kids from being, taken out of the country and all that. So they separate kids from parents and ask you questions. And it's stuff like that where, you're like, oh my gosh, this is a big moment. You don't necessarily realize, but I trusted my gut that there was going to be opportunity for me to, get back into the airport and go. So I've made a lot of those decisions. And I don't know if it's an intuitive thing or if it's however that gets packaged, but trust trust your gut because you're going to end up where you need to be and where you should be in the good should kind of way. If you follow that.
Yeah. I would say highly intuitive what you're doing. And I was getting shivers all down my body, which is my intuition saying, yes, 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 we hit the jackpot. Ding, ding, ding. Okay. When you hear the word limitless, the name of this show, what are 3 words, what feelings are evoked for you?
Freedom, autonomy, and respect.
Oh, amazing. And finally, if you're having a bit of a low vibe, funky day, what's your go-to song that you put on to raise your mood and vibration?
Oh, my favorite album of all time is The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill. And if my kids walk in the house and that is blaring, they're like, all right, here we go. I'm a huge music person in terms of being able to get out of your own way. So that is an album that came out when I was in middle school because I'm 175. And I loved it from the minute I heard it. I know every single song, every single word. And there's just something about being in that space of I'm dancing around my kitchen to the same album that I danced around my bedroom to when I was 15 years old. That just makes me happy.
Yes. So is music a real portal for you personally?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And my kids love music too. So it's sort of if the house is all haywire, all of a sudden there's music on. It's oh my God.
Yeah.
Here we go. Change the scene.
Totally. We use it as a intentional tool in our house. And we now have a Alexa now plays at 6:15 every night as a dance party song. So we have this impromptu, but it's not because it comes on every night. And it's just sometimes she gets Alexa off straight away from somebody. But some nights we're all up and dancing, and it's the best way to just change the energy of the house and have a bit of fun. So, well, Ashley, I have loved our conversation today. Thank you so much for coming on my podcast. And it was great to reconnect. And I know that everyone would have learned a lot from you today and been fascinated by all of the stories that you have shared.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me here. I love the message of what you're putting out there for people because, it's true. We all have a ton of potential and we have a ton of, we have more ability than we give ourselves credit for. And being able to connect with that and move forward that's the goal, right?
Yeah, 100%. And best of luck with the launch of Dovetail because I know it's coming up very, very soon.
Very soon. Thank you.
Thanks, Ashley. Thank you for tuning in to Limitless. If you enjoyed today's episode and love hearing the stories of courageous cycle breakers, I'd be grateful if you could leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Your feedback not only helps others discover the show, but it also amplifies our mission to unlock emotional freedom and true potential. Every review makes a difference in helping more people embrace their limitless life.